Alright, so I have a project I wanted to do for actually quite a while because I have a bunch of dead motherboards, busted cases, and just some parts on Xbox consoles that are just, it's too costly to go through and repair them and try to resell them. So just with some of the spare parts and other things that I have laying around, what I've wanted to try to do is take an Xbox and just build a wood case for it. Just very simple box, put it inside of it, do it with some oak or maple or something on the outside. I try to make it as small as I possibly can. So what we have here is a 1.6 motherboard, and some of the stuff that we need to do to try to shrink this and make it as small as possible is, some modifications to parts of using 2.5-inch hard drives to, shrink that hard drive footprint, and modifying the actual CD drive itself to where we have the components to where the board sees it, but we don't necessarily need the drive to work since it's going to be soft modded and everything's loaded onto the hard drive anyways. I don't need that drive anymore. And I know you can do this with mod chips and not need that CD drive attached, but I know I keep saying CD drive is the DVD drive, but whatever. The disk drive, and I know you can do it with mod chips, but don't want to do it with mod chips. Have all the stuff to do soft modding, so wanted to go about that route. So here is just my mock-up board. Kind of drew everything out onto just a sheet of paper to, just kind of test fit stuff, see how it's going to line up and work. So a couple of the first things are the front panel connectors. So this is a standard front panel connector. It's got pretty short wires, and it needs to go over here, which isn't going to give me a whole lot of room to play with it, see where it's going to line up. What I have noticed is some of the other Xboxes, not the 1.6s, but I think it was actually a couple of the 1.0 boards, they have an additional board that sits in the front, because I originally think these connectors were going to be different, and then they realized that they weren't going to work, or the cables were just going to be too long. What they have are these actual other boards that have a little slot that these actually slot into the top, and then these pieces plug into the front. Now this is off of a 1.6. This is off of a 1.0 board. I haven't seen this on every single 1.0 board, but I have seen these on a couple. But what they have is their controller connectors have much longer wires, and there's actually a lot more wire balled up inside of here. So we can actually get these much farther away. As you can see, the wire's almost 2.5, 3 times as long. So when I plug that over here into the Game 1 port, I can actually almost pull it all the way across the board, so I can get it kind of lined up in the middle, because this is actually just going to come down to a 2-controller board. So first thing was figure out our controller ports, and that's player 1, player 2. That's going to sit somewhere in here. Next thing was cooling. I still need to be able to get a fan on this and everything, so I 3D printed a fan mount, and actually have a fan in the front. It goes over the top of both of the heat sinks, and the wire actually comes out underneath it, and just kind of a rough fit for getting it into place. Go through, fan mount, cooling, done. Now, be it this is going to back up to something else, so that'll actually help hold that into place. Then our hard drive, shrinking it down to a SATA adapter. This is just a 3D printed mount, a couple of hooks on the front to help hold this piece in. Our power supply, because our power supply is going to need to sit in the case, so just 3D printed small mount for that, so that way this can all sit inside of it and actually sit over the top of some other stuff, our CD drive. This is all we need off of the disk drive for the board to be able to see it. Now there are some other modifications underneath this board. Unfortunately, I already permanently attached it, but there are 2 ports on this ribbon cable. I do believe it's the last one and the third one in that you need to jump. There's actually a jumper wire in there. I don't know if you can see that at all. Actually, you can't, but there's a jumper wire in there. And jumping those 2 pins, what it does is it tells the disk drive that the drive is closed. It is permanently closed. And this is solely just there so we can get the box to boot up. Next thing was the IDE cables. So what I did is I just bought a short 18-inch round cable because that was the shortest one I could find with 3 connectors on it, and I stripped the actual coating and everything off the top, and that's just mostly so we can ball this up. And this is actually going to get all tied up kind of nice in there and everything, and just so we can get this all to mount in there really good. So the plan was have that plugged in there. Next up is our disk drive getting plugged in. Underneath that is our CD drive, or the actual hard drive itself. The hard drive power connector. Or not hard drive power connector, but the CD drive power connector. It's going to sit there. That's going to come up on top of that. The way I have this mounted is this is actually all going to sit right on top of the fan mount. That's going to go over to the side. I can tie all these cables up down underneath, and we are still underneath our fan profile. That's what I'm trying to do, is keep everything underneath the size of the top of the fan. So that's all going to sit like that. Now, that leaves me this space to put the power supply. The problem I ran into on that is these brown, green, and red wires that are right here are too short for this to be able to fully extend over. So we're going to use a short 6-inch extension. Get that plugged in over on that side. That's going to plug in on top. The power wire for the hard drive is going to come down and underneath all of this. Get plugged into there. And this power cable will get tied up underneath there a lot better. But then we're going to have the power supply sitting roughly in that location. That gives me still this gap underneath this to get the rest of the wires in, but that actually puts the power supply inside the motherboard profile, sitting on top, still below the height of the fan. Now, since we don't have an operational disk drive, there's actually some stuff we don't need on the power button. So this is pretty much going to be the profile of the main board and everything, and the case going around it. So the next thing we have is the actual power button itself. And what I did is I actually removed the power button off the top, and I jumped those wires up to the eject button, and right there is I actually broke the traces for the eject button. So right now our eject button is working like a power button. And that's mostly just because I still want to use the factory parts for the LEDs to get the entire thing to work. So that way, you hit the eject button, console turns on, lights and everything are still working on the front the exact way that it should. And then that just plugs in. I've tested this multiple times, works out great. Of just taking that, jumping those wires. I have some conformal coating over the top of it, but going to coat the rest of it with some liquid electrical tape. But for right now, this is our compact Xbox, and then it's, like I said, it's going to come down to, it's only going to be a 1 and 2 player box. I might modify the case later to add the 3 and 4, but for right now, it's just going to be 1 and 2, and that's so we can get everything to fit inside of the profile of the actual case itself. And the power button is going to be mounted over off to the side, kind of like it has been on the newer consoles, but just get that in, get it mounted over onto the side. And that's kind of our start to the compact case or compact design. This has taken a lot of hours to do, just tweaking and modifying the design, 3D printing parts, having them not be the right size, and needing to redo them. But we will go through and get the rest of this all done and taken care of, and I will bring you back in the next one once I actually have once I actually start working on the case itself, get all that in, get that taken care of and done. But thanks for stopping in, and have a good night.